Ottessa Moshfegh's Eileen is another character-driven novel by this author that feels more like the trend rather than the outlier after reading 3 books by this author, which have been Death in Her Hands, now Eileen, and then Lapvona. Eileen is a story that explores what it means to be uncomfortable as a human being in a way that I haven't really seen described or explored in this way before. I can definitely appreciate what Moshfegh does in this book as very compelling but very dark, with a narrator who is simultaneously self-loathing but also very disturbingly human and relatable. This book is set in a 1964 grimy Massachusetts town during the cold weather, the winter, and I would probably pitch the story as a very dedicated character study that is wearing slow burn thriller clothing. And it all centers around our main character, 24-year-old Eileen, who is narrating her life in retrospect as a now older woman, and in her own words we see that she lives a life that is cloaked in grime. She's working a pretty unsatisfying dead-end job at a boys' prison, living with her very abusive father, and for what I think more plot-focused and plot-centric readers might find this book lacking in, I think it makes up for when you consider Moshfegh's prose, which I constantly find very effective, very transfixing, and in this book just really well communicates filth and the grime that I think we're meant to feel when it comes to spending time with Eileen. So as she's living this life, working at this boys' prison, living with her father, she fantasizes constantly about escape, and that's a little bit more intensified when she comes across and meets a new employee at the prison named Rebecca. And once this pairing of these two characters occurs, the story goes from mere day-to-day character study to not quite like noir or psychological horror, but rather a reflection on desperation and the obsession that is festering within this woman, Eileen. She is truly obsessed with this co-worker, Rebecca, and it eventually escalates from something that feels at first like a semi-harmless crush to being complicit in very serious crimes. And that escalation was what I liked the most about this book, but it didn't come until pretty late. And that kind of speaks to my experience with Moshfegh's work so far, where I'm all for it when it comes to the blurb and what it's selling on the back of the book for me, but I find that it sort of oversells what is actually happening on the page when it comes to that relationship. That's not to say that the book isn't effective in its very gritty character study of Eileen in Moshfegh's discomfort-inducing writing. Eileen isn't just unlikable in a very trendy and stylized way. She is what happens when a human being becomes entirely defined by constraint and shame, but I find that the ending is pretty satisfying when it comes to the reinvention that she undergoes at the hands of herself and by the will of herself. So while I wouldn't call this the perfect book for me, I think it's a step in the right direction when it comes to reading Moshfegh's work in my experience. It's pretty bleak, it's pretty consistently slow, but it still has me wanting to experience a little bit more of this author's work. So which one of Moshfegh's books should I read next?